Hello and welcome to another video and podcast from Fantasy Football Scout. Today we usually look at the team news for the weekend's matches. There was a Sky Fantasy football video planned too, but we were told this morning that the Premier League, along with many sporting events globally, will be postponed due to the coronavirus. My name is Joe and joining me is David, who as Fantasy Football Scout editor has been reporting on this week's developments. David, let's start with letting people know what's been going on really with regarding Premier League's matches. So yeah, what do we know so far? What's the situation?
Yeah, so pretty unprecedented a situation where the Premier League has basically suspended all matches until I believe it's April the 4th, which effectively means that game week 30 and game week 31 just aren't happening, or rather the
Okay.
matches in those game weeks aren't happening. No football in the whole country at
No.
top level until April 3rd, so that includes the Championship, League One, League Two. In terms of the timeline, it's been a pretty hectic couple of days. I mean, if you'd have told me on Monday, Tuesday that this was going to be coming at the end of the week, I wouldn't have believed you, because it didn't look as serious at the beginning of the week as it has now. Perhaps that's testament to just how quickly coronavirus can spread, although I'm no expert. The timeline was that we saw earlier this week, or the back end of last week, saw confirmation that the Olympiacos owner obviously announced that he had coronavirus. The Olympiacos squad was then tested. But then, of course, that meant that we saw the Man City Arsenal game postponed because Arsenal were in contact with the owner in the Europa League. Then we've since found out that some Leicester players were put into self-isolation for showing similar symptoms to the coronavirus. And obviously, we have no confirmation as to whether or not any of them have got it, because according to the club, their symptoms weren't strong enough for them to take a test. Because that's the crucial thing in all this is the test. Then, with all that sort of uncertainty kind of hanging around, on Thursday night, the Premier League said everything's going to go ahead as normal this weekend. That's following, of course, Boris Johnson's announcement on Thursday that they wouldn't, at this stage, ban major sporting events, and he touched on some of the reasons why. So I won't go into detail on that. If you want to if you want to see why, go and have a look at some of the news content on that. But everybody's hand was forced on Thursday night by the fact that Arsenal announced that their manager Mikel Arteta had tested positive for the coronavirus, which actually came within an hour of the Premier League saying all the games were going to go ahead. Which was, so as I said, completely crazy timeline. And from what I've seen in the press, which again is just in the press, there's a suggestion that the Arteta having coronavirus actually has no connection with the Olympiacos game. They sort of, some of the contacts around the club are suspecting that he contracted it through a different point of contact. Obviously, Arteta then having coronavirus meant that the Arsenal squad was placed into self-isolation because they've been in extensive contact with him, not least just sort of on a day-to-day basis, but hugging and kissing and celebrating the fact they beat West Ham, and all that sort of thing. So Arsenal go into self-isolation. Half an hour later, Brighton announced the game's cancelled. And then it was at that point the Premier League said, right, Friday morning, emergency meeting. And here we are, Friday morning, and they've suspended the Premier League for 2 weeks, which really should come as no surprise, because actually even after Arteta was announced as having coronavirus on Thursday night, we found out in the early hours of Friday morning that Callum Hudson-Odoi had also contracted it as well at Chelsea. So the Chelsea squad is now in self-isolation. A few other bits that have come out. Everton are in self-isolation right now, although they don't have anyone tested positive. They're just taking precautionary measures. The same is true at Bournemouth. Artur Boruc is one of the ones who is going to be tested, we believe. And then also Watford are waiting on some tests as well. So a number of Premier League squads are now sort of in the precautionary stage, taking measures against making sure this sort of thing doesn't spread. And of course, that just left the Premier League with absolutely no choice but to suspend for the next 2 weeks. Now, what I will do before I come back to you, Joe, is, because I appreciate it's a lot of information, it's a bit of an info dump for some people, I will just read the Premier League's official statement so that we're aware of what the official line is at this point. My suspicion is that with all the sporting events, and not just the Premier League, the Championship, everything in the EFL, rugby, absolutely everything, because of what we've seen in Italy and Spain, I'm sure this is not the only measure and only statement we're going to get. I imagine that we might see further statements. We might sort of review the situation in a few weeks and go from there. But this is what it is as it stands. So following a meeting of shareholders today, it was unanimously decided to suspend the Premier League with the intention of returning on the 4th of April, subject to medical advice and conditions at the time. So that's what I mean, in the sense that they will have to be constantly reviewing that date as a return date for the Premier League. Premier League Chief Executive Richard Masters said, above all, we wish Mikel Arteta and Callum Hudson-Odoi speedy recoveries and everyone also affected with COVID-19. Obviously, at Fantasy Football Scout, we wish the same as well. In this unprecedented situation, we are working closely with our clubs, the government, the FA, and the EFL, and can reassure everyone the health and welfare of players and staff supporters are a priority. Now, this is the crucial thing for fantasy managers. We're going to sort of talk about the questions that some of you may have. This is all we have at the moment, and I'll let you ask a few more questions about it in just a second, Joe. Despite the challenges, it is the Premier League's aim to reschedule the displaced fixtures, so that's game week 30 and 31 fixtures, and that obviously also includes some FA Cup games as well, included those placed by academy sides when it is safe to do so. So they are intending to rearrange these games at a later date, but in this fast-moving environment, further updates will be provided when appropriate. So, yeah, that's it. That's all the information that we have so far. I'll throw it back to you, Joe.
Well,
you're probably going to have some questions. So,
well, yeah, I mean, as fancy Premier League managers, but also as a Sky managers as well, and other people play other games. There's all sorts. There's a lot to consider with those games. How you do that, how you rearrange things, when will they get rescheduled and stuff. So the sort of questions I guess people are asking now, and I mean, sadly, I don't, and I'm sure you don't as well, have the answers to these at the moment. But these are the questions that we need to be, when we're at home, we're self-isolating, we're watching Netflix, and we're starting to think about FPL still, because we're all FPL addicts still. Questions like, say, for example, I've got 2 hits this week. I don't know what's going to happen with those. I'm preparing for a free hit in game week 31. I don't know when that's going to happen. These are the questions I'm going to be asking, and hopefully, eventually we'll get a nice update on the FPL site and the Sky site and these types of things. Other people are wildcarding this week. Now, we had a few people in a live chat, and this can be interesting for them. What happens with that? It could be. Who knows? I don't even want. I can't even speculate, because the announcement was at 11, and it's only just gone 12 now. So we've only just heard about it. So it's beyond my remit and brain capacity to work out how to completely rearrange major sporting events fixtures and the corresponding fantasy games around that. But it just gives an indication of the kinds of questions people are going to be asking to themselves. Really, What else is going to be happening with Fantasy Football Scout? Because obviously we had lots planned, didn't we?
Yeah.
But presumably it's going to be a case of keep tabs to the Twitter, keep tabs to the articles, and when we know of developments, when we all know as fantasy managers of these developments, we'll be there hopefully to look at the strategy, etc.
Yeah, I mean, so I'll start on the question about I've taken a hit, I've used my wildcard chips, whatever. We have at this point absolutely no indication what the Premier League are going to do about that. It's just nothing we can do really. All I can say on that is just stay tuned to the Premier League's fantasy content, because that's what we're going to have to do to find out. So we will find out when you find out, basically, and then when we all find out together, maybe. Between us, we can start to kind of maybe look at a little bit of strategy. But that leads me into the next sort of the question you mentioned there, is what that means for Fantasy Football Scout. Personally, I'm quite keen for us to largely step a little bit back from strategy over the next couple of days and mostly focus on the news itself, because obviously it's quite a testing time for a lot of people. This has affected a large number of people, and according to Boris Johnson, it's going to affect even more of us very soon. So, we don't want to be seen as sort of almost trivializing coronavirus and sort of focusing too much on Fantasy Premier League. As much as I enjoy playing Fantasy Premier League, I appreciate it is just a game. And even though it's my job, it's still something that the strategy element will take a little bit of a backseat over the next few days. I mean, we don't even know the Premier League may even take several days to decide what the implications are for FPL. So we really can't say too much about it in that sense. But do stay tuned to Fantasy Football Scout, because we will endeavour to bring you all of the news as quick as it comes out. As things stand, there's not too much more that necessarily we need to know, I would suggest. I mean, in terms of the timeline of moving forward, just from a purely football kind of perspective rather than Fantasy Premier League, I would suggest the next few days we'll probably see some Premier League teams perhaps announcing the results of some of their tests. So it sounds like we may get some tests results from Watford. We may probably get some from West Ham, because I'm sure that with the Arteta announcement, they have certainly been testing their players. And David Moyes, who of course I believe shook Arteta's hand in game 29. So all sorts of things like that I would expect to see come out in the next few days. Obviously, there's not so much that fantasy managers can do with that, but of course we're all interested in football, so I'm sure people will want to see. We'll do our best to bring those results when they come out. And then the next big meeting, of course, is going to be on Tuesday, when UEFA are having a meeting, and they did stress it would be a video conference. They're not going to be pulling everybody all into one place at this time, which is very sensible. A video conference between all 55 governing bodies within UEFA who represent their country's football association. So our FA, of course, will be involved in that. Spanish La Liga, Serie A, France, everybody will be involved in that to discuss what the future of European football is going to be, because that really is the key in terms of what to expect from the Premier League moving forward. Of course, what they've done at this point is suspend the league, but we already have people talking about, well, is the league ever going to be able to finish? Are they going to cancel the season? Liverpool fans are worried that it will get made null and void and they won't win the league. There's so many questions that football fans have right now, and I would suggest, just from my personal opinion, so don't take this with a pinch of salt, I would say, that probably will depend on the fate of Euro 2020, the tournament in the summer, because that's obviously up in the air now. It's somewhat ironic because it's an anniversary year for the Euros, and it means that rather than have one host nation, it's kind of like everybody's hosting it. And it's the worst year for that to have happened, where everybody traveling everywhere. So I would suggest that the Euros is at risk of being postponed. That's what we're hearing in the press. More so than it would have been if it was just in one country.
Well, of course, it's the Olympics as well. This is a huge year for sport. And it's as you say, it's like a jigsaw, isn't it?
Absolutely.
They're all related to it. They're all dependent on the other. So if one goes, as they are, you've got to look at all the different pieces of that. Yeah.
So I mean, the thing with the Euros is that basically, and again, do stay tuned on this. This is just sort of my expectation of the timeline. If we find out on Tuesday that Euro 2020 is being postponed to 2021, then it gives the European leagues, of course, Premier League as well, slightly more time to complete their seasons, because then they don't have to worry about finishing in time for the Euros. And then, as I said, sort of at the top, as the Premier League are indicating that, they will be reviewing based on the medical advice and conditions at the time, whether or not the 4th of April is the comeback time. That may also depend on the Euros. So definitely keep an eye on that. We'll be trying to bring you some coverage of that meeting on Tuesday, because as I said, the Euros is a big one. And of course, in terms of what's happening on Fantasy Football Scout, if the Euros were to be going ahead this summer, then we would have been having a full program as we did for the World Cup, covering the Euro fantasy game. We have Euros data, so we were all poised and ready to cover that tournament. If it's not happening, then sadly we won't be able to cover it until next year. As you said, it's a massive, massive jigsaw piece. There's so many moving parts. There's a constantly changing situation. From a purely football fan perspective, there's plenty of things left to sort of slot into place. From an FPL perspective, as I said, we have absolutely no inclination as to what FPL are going to do in light of the postponements, or when we will find out. We have no idea, so stay tuned. And I suppose just from a personal perspective, stay safe. Do whatever it takes to make sure that you don't become ill. We've been putting out on all our videos the official advice from the NHS, which is, if you think you might have coronavirus, stay at home, avoid close contact with other people, do not go to a GP surgery, pharmacy or hospital, and use the NHS 111 online coronavirus service to find out what to do next. So throughout this whole thing, I just want to make sure that everybody's aware of that information too. Accurate information about this particular virus is crucial. So make sure you're staying well informed on that as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, just before we go, obviously, when there's more information, obviously that content's going to be there in podcast, video. We're going to have that in articles as well, follow the tweets as well, when we get more information about what's happening with FPL and the other fantasy games around that. But I also just wanted to say about the FPL community and the fantasy football community that's out there, wherever you chat to people, whether it's in real life, and it's going to be more important than ever on social media. So for example, if you're on the Fantasy Football Scout forum, at the moment there's nearly 500 people on the live chatting away about it as well, and there's clearly an appetite to carry on talking about it, and obviously when we're all going to be at home much more, over the coming weeks, possibly. We're going to be chatting about that. So wherever you're chatting to, keep chatting away about it, and there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong about being trivial about these things, thinking, because of this major thing that's happening, it seems trivial to talk about fantasy football, and it does in a way. But at the same time, that's what we are. We're just human beings. We want to interact, and we want as best to carry on as we can. And one of those ways is to chat online with people about fantasy football. So carry on doing that. But for now, David, I usually say good luck with the game week. We don't know when that's going to be. But for now, stay safe and goodbye.
And you as well, Joe.